I came home after 9 months overseas expecting to sleep in my own bed. Instead, a stranger opened my front door holding a toddler on her hip. My furniture was gone. My truck wasn't in the driveway. My father's flag case was missing from the wall. And when I checked my bank account from the curb, the balance was $14.73. The woman at the door looked at me like I was the intruder. "Can I help you?" she asked. I stared past her into my own living room, where my couch used to sit. "This is my house," I said. Her face changed. "No," she said quietly. "We bought this house from your mother." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I had been awake for almost 30 hours. Flights, layovers, a long bus ride from base, then a cab from the station. I was still wearing my uniform pants and the gray hoodie I had slept in against an airport wall. I looked at the house number. Same mailbox I had painted black before I left. Same crack in the front step. Same oak tree my father planted when I was 10. The woman shifted the toddler to her other hip. "Are you Marcus Hale?" she asked. Hearing my name come from her mouth made my stomach drop. "Yes." She swallowed. "Your mother said you moved overseas permanently." I didn't answer, because I knew then, before anyone explained anything, that my mother had not made a mistake. She had told a story, and somehow, everybody had believed it. I called her from the sidewalk. She answered on the third ring, cheerful as if I had caught her folding laundry. "Marcus? You're home. Where are my things?" Silence. Not surprise. Not confusion. Just silence. Then she sighed. I was going to explain. I looked at the stranger standing in my doorway, with pity in her eyes. "Explain why another family is living in my house." My mother lowered her voice. "You were gone, Marcus. I was deployed. You weren't answering like before. I was in a restricted area half the time. You knew that." Another pause. Then she said the words that told me this was worse than panic or bad judgment. "I did what I had to do." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You sold my house." It was becoming a burden. A burden to who? To the family. That was my mother's favorite word when she wanted something from me. Family. She used it like a key, like a knife, like a chain. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. The woman at the door told me her name was Natalie. Her husband, Chris, came from the kitchen after she called him. They weren't cruel. They were terrified. They showed me paperwork. A sale contract. A deed transfer. A power of attorney. My name was on every page. My signature was at the bottom. But I had never signed any of it. Chris kept saying, "We bought it through a real estate attorney. Everything was legal." I believed him. That was the worst part. They weren't thieves. They were the last people in a long line of people my mother had fooled. I asked if I could walk through the house once. Natalie hesitated, then nodded. The place smelled like baby shampoo and fresh paint. My father's old recliner was gone. The bookshelf I built during my first year in the service was gone. The framed photo of my dad and me at my boot camp graduation was gone. In the hallway, a little boy's drawings were taped where my father's flag case used to hang. That nearly broke me. My father had served 26 years. When he died, the flag from his funeral was the one thing I told my mother never to touch. I had locked it in the den before deployment. Now the den was a nursery. I stood there too long. Natalie said, "I'm sorry. We didn't know." I nodded because I knew she meant it. Then I left my own house carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a rage so heavy it felt like another piece of luggage. I went to the bank first. The manager was a woman named Denise who had known me since I opened my first savings account at 16. When she saw me, she smiled. Then she saw my face. "Marcus, I need statements. Everything from the last 9 months." Her smile disappeared. We sat in her office while she pulled up my accounts. Checking emptied in 4 transfers. Savings emptied in 2 cashier's checks. My emergency fund closed. My deployment pay had been rerouted 3 months earlier. Denise kept looking at the screen, then back at me. These were authorized through online banking. I didn't authorize them. There was identity verification. From where? She clicked carefully. "The logins came from your mother's address." I closed my eyes. Denise whispered, "I'm so sorry." Then she printed the statements and gave me the first real piece of evidence. 1 cashier's check had gone to a used car dealership. 1 to a storage auction company. 2 transfers had gone to my younger brother, Trent. That name hit differently. My mother was the storm. Trent was always the damage left behind. He was 32, always starting over, always 1 month away from getting his life together. When we were kids, He was funny and reckless. As adults, he became expensive. Mom protected him from every consequence. Speeding tickets, evictions, bad checks, broken promises. And whenever I complained, she said, "He's not strong like you." I used to think she meant it as praise. Now I knew it was permission. I drove to my mother's house. My house was gone, but she still had hers. A small white ranch on the edge of town with wind chimes on the porch and fake flowers by the steps. Trent's motorcycle was in the driveway. Of course it was. I knocked once, then opened the door with the key she never knew I still had. My mother was at the kitchen table. Trent stood by the fridge. Neither looked shocked. That hurt more than if they had screamed. Mom's hair was freshly done. Her nails were painted pale pink. She looked rested. I had spent 9 months eating dust and sleeping in bursts, and she looked like she had just come home from brunch. "Where's Dad's flag?" I asked. Not hello. Not why. That. Her mouth tightened. "Marcus, sit down." "Where is it?" Trent looked away. Mom folded her hands. "I put some things in storage." "Which storage?" She didn't answer. I stepped closer. "You sold my house. You emptied my accounts. You sold my truck. You forged my signature. But if you pawn Dad's flag, I swear. Don't threaten me in my own home." I laughed again. That empty laugh was starting to feel like the only sound I had left. "Your home." Her eyes flashed. "Yes, my home. The one I had to keep together while you were gone. You didn't keep anything together. You took everything I had." She stood up then. "You left me to handle it all. I was deployed. You left me with problems." "What problems?" She looked at Trent. He shook his head slightly. And there it was. The first secret. I turned to him. "What did you do?" Trent pushed off the fridge. "Man, you come in here acting like you're the only one who ever had it hard." I asked what you did. Mom snapped. "He made mistakes." I stared at her. "How much?" Nobody answered. "How much did he owe?" Trent rubbed his jaw. "It wasn't like that." Mom stepped between us. "We needed money quickly. So you sold my life?" "I had your power of attorney." "No, you had a forgery." Her eyes didn't move. Then she said, "You gave me permission years ago. I gave you permission to pick up my mail during basic training. That was not permission to sell my house. You always said family comes first. I said that before I knew you thought family meant me paying for Trent's disasters." Trent slammed his hand on the counter. "You think you're better than me because you wear that uniform?" "No. I think I'm better than you because I don't steal from my brother while he's overseas." His face went red, but he didn't come toward me. He had always been brave when Mom stood between us. I looked back at her. "I want every document, every receipt, every account you touched, and I want Dad's flag by tonight." Mom's expression changed then. The anger drained out, leaving something colder. "You need to be careful." I blinked. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice." From her purse, she pulled out a folded paper and slid it across the table. It was a copy of the power of attorney. My signature sat at the bottom, but beside it was something I hadn't seen at Natalie's house. A notary stamp. The notary was my Aunt Rena, my father's sister, the woman who brought casseroles after every funeral, the woman who cried beside me at Dad's grave. I picked up the paper slowly. Mom watched my face. "You can drag this through court if you want," she said, "but it will ruin more than me." That was when I understood. She wasn't just hiding theft. She was hiding a network. I left without saying another word. That night, I checked into a cheap motel outside town. The room smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. I put my duffel on the bed and spread the bank records across the comforter. Every transfer had a date. Every date told a story. My savings started disappearing 2 weeks after I deployed. My truck sold after 6 weeks. My house listed after 3 months. My mail forwarded after 4 months. My deployment pay rerouted after 6 months. This wasn't desperation. This was a schedule. At 11:18 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then a voicemail appeared. I played it. A man's voice said, "Mr. Hale, this is Officer Grant with County Police. I'm calling about the complaint your mother filed tonight. She says you came to her home, threatening violence. We need to speak with you." I sat on the edge of the motel bed. My mother had stolen everything from me. Then she called the police on me. The next morning, I went to the station before they came looking. Officer Grant was maybe 40, calm, tired-eyed. He listened while I explained. Then I showed him the bank records, the deed, the power of attorney, the deployment orders, everything. At first his face stayed professional. Then he saw the dates. "You were overseas when this was notarized?" "Yes." He tapped the page. Your aunt notarized your signature while you were overseas? Yes. He leaned back. That's a problem. For me or for them? For whoever thought nobody would check. For the first time since I came home, I felt something besides anger. Not peace, but ground under my feet. Officer Grant told me to file reports for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. He also warned me the house would be complicated because innocent buyers were involved. I don't want to hurt that family, I said. He nodded. Then focus on the people who created the fraud. I knew exactly who that was, but I still didn't know why. Trent owed money. Fine, but not enough to explain everything. My house had sold for far more than his usual disasters. My savings had been drained. My pay had been redirected. My truck was gone. Where did all that money go? The answer came from the last person I expected. My Aunt Rena called 2 days later. Her voice sounded small. Marcus, can we meet? I almost said no. Then she added, your father would hate what's happening. So I met her at a diner near the old highway. She looked older than I remembered. Her hands shook when she stirred her coffee. I didn't know they were selling the house, she said before I sat down. You notarized the document. I notarized one page. Your mother said you had signed it before you left, and she needed the stamp because the bank was giving her trouble. That is not how notarizing works. I know. Then why did you do it? She stared into her cup. Because she told me Trent was in danger. I sat back. What kind of danger? Rena swallowed. He owed money to people who don't send letters. That sounded like Trent. But it still didn't fit. How much? She told me 30,000. I laughed under my breath. My house sold for over 200,000. Rena looked up sharply. She told me she only needed access to one account. I pulled out the statements and slid them across the table. She read them. Her face went pale. Oh, Marcus. Did you know someone was pretending to be me? Her eyes lifted. What? Emails? Phone calls? Approvals? Somebody handled my bank, my insurance, the closing. She shook her head. No, I didn't know that. I believed her. Not because she was innocent. Because she looked afraid for the first time. Then she said something I will never forget. Ask about the life insurance. The diner noise faded. What life insurance? Rena's lips pressed together. Your father had a policy. After he died, your mother said it barely covered expenses. It didn't. Rena looked toward the window. Your father told me once that he changed the beneficiary before he got sick. My pulse slowed. To who? To you. I felt the room tilt slightly. My father had died 5 years earlier from a heart attack. Mom handled everything. The funeral, the estate, the paperwork. She told me there was nothing left except the house and his flag. I had believed her because she was my mother. Rena reached into her purse and pulled out an old envelope. Your father gave me this before he died. He said if anything ever felt wrong, I should give it to you. I should have done it years ago. Inside was a copy of a beneficiary change form. My name, my father's signature, a policy number, and a handwritten note. Marcus, if you're reading this, something went wrong. I hope it didn't. I hope I was paranoid. But if I know anything, it's that your mother can turn fear into a reason to do anything. I loved her, but I never fully trusted what she became when money was involved. This policy is yours. Use it to build something steady. Don't let anyone tell you that being the strong one means being the one everyone gets to take from. Dad, I read it 3 times. The anger I had been carrying cracked open. Underneath it was grief. Fresh, sharp grief for a man who had tried to protect me from beyond the grave. My mother hadn't started stealing when I deployed. She had started years earlier. I contacted the insurance company that afternoon. It took 2 days and several transfers before I reached a supervisor willing to listen. When I sent the documents, there was a long silence on the phone. Then she said, Mr. Hale, our records show the policy was paid out 4 years ago. To who? Another pause. To your mother, as beneficiary. My father changed it to me. We have a later beneficiary form. She emailed me a copy. My father's signature was on it. Except it wasn't my father's signature. I knew because my father always made the H in Hale too tall, like a ladder. This H was flat. My mother had forged my father's name after he died. And if she could do that, forging mine while I was overseas probably felt easy. I took everything to Officer Grant. This time, he brought in a detective. Detective Sloan was direct, which I appreciated. Your mother has been financially exploiting you for years, she said. Possibly your father's estate too. She used Trent as the excuse. Maybe. Or maybe Trent was useful because everyone already expected him to be the problem. That sentence stayed with me, because I had expected it too. For the next 2 weeks, I slept in the motel, answered investigators' questions, and rebuilt my life one phone call at a time. I froze my credit, opened new accounts, filed military fraud protections, reported the forged power of attorney, tracked down my truck. It had been sold to a man 3 counties over, who had no idea anything was wrong. Just like Natalie and Chris, he was innocent. Everyone who had my things had a receipt. Everyone who had taken them from me had a story from my mother. My mother had told people I was unstable after deployment. She told the bank I wanted a simpler life overseas. She told the real estate agent I was marrying someone abroad. She told neighbors I had cut off contact. She told my church I didn't want visitors. She didn't just steal my property. She erased me first. That realization hurt worse than the money. Then came the call that changed everything. It was from a woman named Vanessa, who worked at the real estate office that handled the sale. "I probably shouldn't be calling," she said, "but I saw your report in the system, and I remember your closing." "I wasn't at my closing." "I know." My hand tightened around the phone. "What do you mean, you know?" "There was a video call, supposedly with you, but the man kept his camera angled low. I thought it was strange." "A man?" "Yes. Your mother said the connection was bad because you were overseas." My heart started pounding. "Do you remember anything else?" "He didn't sound like you," she said. "At least, not like your voicemail. I called your number afterward to confirm something, and the voicemail voice was different." "What number did you call?" "She gave it to me. It wasn't mine, but I recognized the last 4 digits. Trent." I drove to Trent's apartment that night, but he wasn't there. His landlord was outside smoking and told me Trent had moved out 2 weeks earlier. "Your mom helped him load a trailer," he said. "Do you know where he went?" "Nope." But he looked nervous. That was new. Trent was selfish, reckless, angry, but nervous meant something had scared him. The next morning, Detective Sloan called me in. She placed a printed photo on the table. It was a screenshot from the video closing. A man in a baseball cap, camera low, face partly shadowed. But I knew my brother's jawline. I knew the scar near his chin from when we wrecked our bikes as kids. Trent had pretended to be me. My own brother had sat on a call, used my name, and helped sell my home while I was deployed. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Detective Sloan said, "We also found something else." She slid over bank records. After the house sale, large payments went to Trent. But larger payments went somewhere else. A limited liability company. Harbor Light Care Services. I frowned. "What is that?" "A private care facility 2 counties away." "My mother isn't in a care facility." "No," Detective Sloan said. "But someone named Paul Mercer was." I stared at her. I didn't know that name. She watched me carefully. "Your mother visited him every week." "My mother?" "Yes." "Who is he?" "That's what we hoped you could tell us." I couldn't. And that scared me more than when I saw my empty house. Because my mother was not sentimental. She did not visit people every week unless guilt, money, or leverage was involved. Sometimes all 3. I called Aunt Rena. The moment I said Paul Mercer, she went silent. Then she whispered, "Oh no. Who is he?" "Marcus. Tell me." Her voice broke. "He was your mother's first husband." I stood in the motel parking lot with traffic rushing by and felt like the world had stopped. My mother was married before Dad. "Yes." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Your father knew. Most people didn't." "She wanted it buried." "Why?" Rena inhaled shakily. "Because he didn't leave her. She left him after the accident." "What accident?" Rena hesitated too long. "What accident?" "He had a brain injury. Couldn't work. Needed care. Your mother signed papers making herself responsible for some of his expenses. Then she married your father not long after." My mouth went dry. "And she's been paying for him." "I thought your father handled something years ago." I didn't know she was still involved. Now the shape of my mother's theft changed. This wasn't only about Trent. It wasn't only greed. It was a secret life she had been funding for decades. A secret obligation. A man hidden away. And I had paid for him with my house, my savings, and my father's legacy. When Detective Sloan confirmed it, the truth was even uglier. My mother had used my father's insurance money for herself years earlier. Then when Paul Mercer's care costs increased, she fell behind. The facility threatened legal action. At the same time, Trent owed dangerous people money. 2 emergencies. One solution. Me. She used my deployment as cover because I was hard to reach, easy to impersonate, and trained to trust family during crisis. But the larger twist came 3 days later. Detective Sloan called and asked me to come in immediately. When I arrived, my mother was already in an interview room. Through the glass, I saw her sitting with perfect posture, purse in her lap, looking annoyed. Not scared. Annoyed. Detective Sloan handed me a folder. We found the original application for Paul Mercer's care payment plan. I opened it. My mother's name was there. Paul's name was there. And under responsible party, there was a third name. Mine. My signature. Dated 11 years earlier. I would have been 22. Stationed out of state. I stared at the page. She made me responsible for his care? She tried to, Sloan said. It may not hold because the signature appears forged. But that's not the main issue. I looked up. Sloan's expression softened. Paul Mercer died 6 years ago. The words didn't make sense. I shook my head. No. You said she visited him. She visited the facility. But not him. Then who was she paying for? Sloan slid out another page. A resident profile. Name, Trent Hale. I read it twice before my brain accepted it. That's my brother. Yes. He was living in his apartment. Sometimes, she said. But he was also receiving outpatient addiction treatment through Harbor Light under a private arrangement your mother hid from everyone. I sank into the chair. My mother hadn't been paying for a hidden first husband. She had used a dead man's file, forged my name onto old care documents, and routed money through the facility to hide payments for Trent's addiction, debts, and cash withdrawals. Paul Mercer was the mask. Trent was the leak. And I was the bank. The worst part was not that Trent needed help. If my brother had called me from a treatment center and said, "I'm drowning," I might have helped. I would have been angry. I would have set boundaries. But I would have helped. Instead, my mother burned my life down to keep him from ever facing the truth. When they finally charged her, she called me from the station. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Not because I owed her. Because I needed to hear what she sounded like when the lies ran out. "Marcus," she said, crying now. I had waited weeks for tears. When they came, they only made me tired. "You need to tell them this is a family matter." It stopped being a family matter when you forged my name. I was trying to save your brother. You destroyed me. You're strong. There it was again. The old excuse. I closed my eyes. No, Mom. I was useful. She sobbed harder. You don't understand what it's like to watch one child fall apart. You're right, I said. But I know what it's like to be the child you sacrificed to catch him. She went quiet. For once, she had no answer. I said, "Where is Dad's flag?" Her breathing changed. "Marcus, where is it?" "I didn't sell it." "Then where?" "I gave it to Trent." My stomach twisted. "Why?" "He said he needed something that reminded him of Dad." I almost believed that. Almost. Detective Sloan found the flag 2 days later at a pawn shop. Trent had pawned it for $80. $80. My father's service, folded into a triangle, traded for less than a tank of gas. That was the moment my grief became something clean. No more confusion. No more hoping for an explanation that would make it hurt less. Some people don't betray you because they misunderstand love. They betray you because they trust your love to survive it. Trent was arrested first. He tried to blame Mom. Mom blamed fear. Aunt Rena cooperated and accepted a lesser charge for the false notarization. She came to me afterward outside the courthouse, crying so hard she could barely speak. "I should have protected you." I looked at her and thought about all the adults who had known pieces of the truth. All the people who stayed quiet because my mother made silence easier than confrontation. "You should have," I said. Then I walked away. My mother took a plea months later. Fraud. Forgery. Identity theft. Financial exploitation. The house sale became tangled in court, but Natalie and Chris were allowed to stay while the title insurance company pursued recovery. I was grateful for that. They had a little boy who loved drawing dinosaurs in the hallway. I didn't want my justice to become their tragedy. The bank restored part of my stolen funds after the fraud investigation. Insurance covered some losses. The military legal office helped me untangle the rest. I never got everything back. Not the bookshelf I built. Not the truck. Not the months of feeling like a ghost in my own hometown. But I got my father's flag back. The pawn shop owner surrendered it after Detective Sloan explained where it came from. The glass case was scratched and one corner was cracked, but the flag inside was still folded perfectly. The day I picked it up, I sat in my car for a long time with the case across my lap. Then I drove to the cemetery. My father's headstone was clean. Someone had left a small stone on top of it. I set the flag case in the grass and read his note one more time. Don't let anyone tell you that being the strong one means being the one everyone gets to take from. For most of my life, I thought strength meant absorbing damage quietly, being reliable, being calm, being the son who didn't cause trouble. But standing at my father's grave, I finally understood something. Strength is not letting people keep hurting you just because they know where your soft spots are. Strength is telling the truth even when the people who lied share your last name. I bought a small condo 6 months later. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. Good locks. A balcony that caught the morning sun. The first thing I hung on the wall was my father's flag. Under it, I placed his note in a frame. On my first night there, I ordered a cheap folding table and ate takeout on the floor. No couch. No bed frame yet. No truck in the parking lot. But the bank account was mine. The keys were mine. The silence was mine. And for the first time since coming home, I slept without wondering what else my mother had taken. A year later, I received a letter from Trent. He was in treatment through the court system. The letter was full of apologies, some real, some rehearsed. He admitted he had pretended to be me on the video call. He admitted Mom coached him. He admitted he pawned Dad's flag. Then he wrote, "I hated you because Mom always said you could handle anything. I thought that meant taking from you didn't count." I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't write back. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. Forgiveness is not a payment plan someone else gets to set up in your name. My mother wrote too. Hers was shorter. She said prison had given her time to think. She said she loved me. She said she hoped I remembered the good years. I did remember them. That was the hardest part. I remembered her packing my school lunches. I remembered her cheering at my high school games. I remembered her crying when I left for basic training. But good memories don't erase forged signatures. Love does not cancel theft. And motherhood is not a shield you get to hide behind after you destroy your son's life. I kept her letter in a box, not because I wanted it, but because I wanted proof. Not for court. For me. Proof that the woman who raised me and the woman who robbed me were the same person. That was the truth I had to survive. People like clean endings. They want the villain punished, the hero restored, the family healed. Real life is messy, eh? My mother faced consequences. My brother faced consequences. My aunt faced consequences. I rebuilt. That was my victory. Not getting everything back. Not making everyone sorry. Not forcing the family to admit they should have protected me. My victory was opening my own front door and knowing nobody else had the key. My victory was seeing my father's flag on my wall and knowing it had survived every lie they wrapped around it. My victory was learning that being loyal to family should never require being disloyal to yourself. So when people ask what happened while I was deployed, I tell them the truth. My mother sold everything I owned. She emptied my bank accounts. She let my brother pretend to be me. And she did it because she believed I would come home, find the wreckage, and still choose silence. She was wrong. For the first time in my life, I didn't protect the family secret. I protected myself. And that is how I finally came home.